noticed they didn't give me the fancy blue square little microphone. That's probably a reason. They probably know better than to give me one of those. I might tear it up, but it's good to see all of you here tonight. We're going to be studying the book of Joshua this quarter, but we're going to look at it through a little different lens. We're going to look at the book of Joshua, or the life of Joshua, and look at leadership lessons we can learn through the book of Joshua. And so that's basically our topic. And so I think we'll dive as deep as we want to dive into the book of Joshua, but we'll also be looking through the lenses and trying to leadership lenses and trying to glean as many lessons that we can learn from this character. To me, Joshua is one of my favorite characters of the Bible to study because of the leadership topic. Leadership has been something that I've tried to study a good bit about and try to improve and try to get better. And I've taught this recently to our college students, and I feel like each time I look at it, I see more and more things jump out to me. So I think this will not be exhaustive from any standpoint, and certainly if you have leadership thoughts as we go through this, then we'll take a look at those things. To start off with, what I'd like for us to look at is the question, in what ways are you a leader? And sometimes we look at leadership a little different. Sometimes you may say, hey, I'm not a leader, that's not me, that's not who I am. But if you think about it, all of us probably are leaders in some capacity in our lives. Maybe within your family, it may be among your siblings, it may be at work, it may be within a division of work, it may even be in friendships that you have. It may be here at church with our church family. It may be in an aspect of ministry. Maybe it's classes that you teach. Some of you teach our children's classes. Some of you may help lead an area of ministry here. And so in one sense, what I'd like for us to embrace is the fact that all of us should be leaders in some kind of capacity. And so then my next question is, what is your leadership style? Different people have different styles of leadership. And I've actually taught leadership styles, and we're not going to look at it through those lenses, but everybody might say, well, I have a particular style of how you like to lead, how you like to approach things. Some people are more out front, very vocal leaders, very strong leaders out front. Some are more quiet leaders and like to sit back and soak in things and then speak up periodically. But would like for you to think about what your leadership style, and then also in what settings do you lead the best? Some of us may be very comfortable in certain settings and very comfortable in leading in some settings, but then very uncomfortable in other settings. And I would say that's all of us. Some of us may serve in leadership roles in certain settings, but in other settings, hey, we don't. That's not best for us to lead. Just because we lead in one setting doesn't mean that we're best to lead in every setting. I saw. Well, I won't go down. I have the tendency to go down rabbit trails. I won't go down that. I saw one thing in the news today of a leader that he had to resign from leadership because he was trying to portray himself in one way, and that was not his forte. And it was very obvious that that was not his forte, and because of that, he had to step down from his leadership position. But we're going to look at Joshua and hopefully learn some lessons about leadership, and some of those may be things that Joshua did very good and did very well. Some of these may be lessons that we learn of Joshua in a setting, and we see how he responded in those things. We also learn sometimes from Joshua things not to do, or things from the book of Joshua, things not to do in leadership. So I hope that we gather all those things as we go through this book. But first of all, what do you remember about Joshua? Don't look ahead at the lesson, but what do you remember in general about Joshua? What are those things that stand out to you? Okay, Moses' successor? His faith? Okay. Okay, conquest of the promised land. Strong, brave, courageous. What? Choose you this day. That's a famous statement there. We'll definitely look at that one. Jericho. That's a neat one. We'll definitely look at all those things. All right. So I don't know how far we'll get tonight. You'll probably see this about my lessons. I probably over-prepare and under-deliver, but we'll see how far we get tonight. We might not even get to chapter 1 tonight, but what I'd like for us to start off with is look at some of the things that we learn about Joshua, leadership lessons outside the book of Joshua, about Joshua, if that makes sense. There are several things about Joshua that we find, and again, this is not exhaustive, but let's turn to Exodus 17 first. Exodus 17. And let me get someone to just go ahead and read verses 8 through 16 for us. All right. This is one of those neat gems of a passage, one of those neat stories. You know, if you were drawing this up to put on a movie, or let's say you're doing a cartoon drawing of this, I wonder what it looked like. You know, Moses battle, and he tells Joshua, okay, you go pick the men, and you go fight, and I'm going to stand up on that mountain, and I'm going to hold the rod of God. And so what happens, he holds the rod up, but then his hand would get weary, and it would drop, and then Israel would start to slack off. And so he'd hold it up, and okay, we're winning the battle, and okay, we're losing the battle. we're winning the battle, we're losing the battle. You wonder if he just tried that just a little bit. Obviously, others notice, okay, when his hand's up, we're winning. So they propped a stone underneath him so it would keep it up. But one of the things I'd like for us to notice about this is look at Joshua in this. So Moses is definitely the leader here in this story, in this situation. But we see that Joshua is the fearless warrior. And I should have, I'm going behind on this. Joshua is the fearless warrior. We see a little bit about Joshua's characteristics of who he was. Moses chose him to go choose the other warriors to go with him, but Joshua was that leader. He was that type of person. He was that warrior that Moses could say, okay, you go pick the best men. You go pick the men that you want to go with you, and you lead them into battle. And so one of the leadership lessons that we can see from this is that leaders are also good followers. They can follow those instructions. Joshua was one here that he followed those instructions of Moses. He followed them to a T. And so much so that here Joshua verse 13, he overwhelmed Amalek. But notice who gives the praise for the situation. Who here in verse 14. God gave the praise. God says, write this as, he tells Moses, write this as a memorial in a book and recite it in the ears of Joshua. To me, that's just a neat passage where God says to Moses, hey, you write this down in a book and you make sure Joshua hears it. Isn't that a neat concept? I hope all of us hear our names written from a book one day that God has made sure was penned. But here's one situation where God says this and wants that to be said in the presence of Joshua. So we see a little bit about Joshua's character, what kind of person. We see from here early on that Joshua was a fearless warrior. Let's next go to Exodus 33, verses 7 through 11. And I know our time flies around here quickly, so we're just going to push on here to cover as much ground as we can. Someone else read verses 7 through 11. So again, this is just one of those neat passages. I think we see a little bit into the relationship that God had with Moses here. We also see the respect that the whole children of Israel had for what they saw. God descending in the pillar of a cloud there. When Moses would go into that tabernacle or tent, to me, that had to be a sight. And here you see that all the children of Israel, they would see, okay, Moses is heading to the tent. They would all come to stand in the doors of their tent, have that respect there for God and for what was going to happen there between God and Moses. But where was Joshua in all this? He was standing right there. He would not depart from the tent. His role was right there. What is Joshua called there? Okay, any other translations there? Okay, some say, I'm using the ESV, and it says assistant. And so there's several interpretations there of that word, but basically it's Moses' right-hand man, and Joshua was that person. He was that assistant, but not just any assistant. He was there when God would descend in that pillar of cloud right there. And, you know, the Lord would speak to Moses face to face as a man speaks to his friend. But when Moses turned again to the camp, his assistant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, would not depart from the tent. Now, we don't know how old he was right here. We probably could figure that out with years. We know that Caleb was 40 when they went to spy out the land. And so how old was Joshua here? He was a young man, but we know he's a fearless warrior. We also know he's Moses' assistant. He's that right-hand person. He's the person basically to guard that tent, guard that tabernacle when Moses was gone. And so he was, the scriptures say he would not depart from that tent. To me, that's, Moses could leave and he knew that was taken care of. That's the kind of person Joshua was. He was that kind of assistant. He was dependable. And with that, leaders are dependable. In leadership roles, we need to be dependable. In your leadership role, you need to be dependable. So many times in today's world, we see where people are shrinking back from their responsibilities, whether it's in the family, whether it's at their jobs. I was talking with one of our daughters even last night. She's frustrated with some of the people she works with, and the bottom line is some people just don't care, you know, and it bugs her. And the fact is that true leaders are dependable. And a lot of times if we're just dependable, we'll find we end up in leadership roles just because people know they can depend on us. Because we're given something to do and we do it. But we should do those things. We should be responsible for any of our leadership roles. All right, next let's turn to Numbers 13 and 14. I've already alluded to this part. When the spies were sent to the land. So, children of Israel were in Egypt. They were under captivity. God sent Moses and Aaron, and we had the plagues. They flee the Red Sea. They've come through the wilderness. They get right up to the Promised Land, and they're there ready to go into the land. And so God says to Moses in chapter 13, verse 1 and 2, send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am given to the people of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, every one a chief among them. So God says, hey, you pick out one from every tribe. So you think about the kind of person that was chosen from each of those tribes. Joshua the son of Nun is in verse 8. there. He was one of those 12 spies sent into the land. So we know a little bit about the type of person. He was at least respected among his tribe. He was a chief. He was a leader among that tribe. They're told by Moses in verses 17, he sent them to spy out the land of Canaan, go up into the Negeb there, and go into the hill country, see what the land is, whether the people who dwell in it are strong or weak, whether they are few or many, whether the land that they dwell in is good or bad, whether the cities that they dwell in are camps or strongholds, and whether the land is rich or poor, whether there are trees in it or not. Be of good courage and bring some of the fruit of the land. Now the time was the season of the first ripe grapes. So they went, they spied out, and at the end of 40 days, verse 25, they returned, and they came back, brought word to them, all the congregation. Verse 26, showed them the fruit of the land. Verse 27, we came to the land which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. However, the people who dwell in the land are strong. The cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there. But Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, verse 30, let's go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it. But we find that 10 of the men gave an evil report. Verse 33, they seemed like grasshoppers to the children of Anak, those giants that were there. Keep this in mind as we go into study Joshua later on. We'll come back to that. Verse 7, the land which we passed through to spy it out is exceedingly good land. This is from Joshua and Caleb, verse 6 there. They said, only do not rebel against the Lord. Do not fear the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their protection is removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. And so they were encouraging people to stand strong there. So we find that that's a little bit about Joshua there. Verse 30 of chapter 14. Basically, God is telling them, you're going to wander in the wilderness. You're all going to die in the wilderness. Verse 30, not one shall come into the land where I swore that I would make you dwell, except Caleb the son of Jephunneh and Joshua the son of Nun. So basically, they're sentenced to wander in the wilderness, to die in the wilderness, except for these two. So a couple things about Joshua there. We see that he's the confident spy. Joshua and Caleb were confident spies. And our leadership lesson there is that leaders see the glass half full when looking through the lenses of God. Their report was different than the other spies. Their report was, we can take this. Their confidence is, their protection is removed from them, and we're well able to overcome it. They saw things through the lenses of God. You know, how many good leaders do you know throughout history that were pessimists? I'm sure there's some out there, but they don't come to mind. Good leaders throughout history are the ones that, we can do this. We're going to do this. Sometimes when those odds were stacked against them, those leaders throughout history, were the ones that that stand out, are the ones that would be confident and see the glass half full there. And so we need to be careful that we don't become pessimistic, that we don't be like the 10 spies, that we are optimistic not necessarily unrealistic, but we need to remember where our strength comes from, and make sure that we're on the right side. And Joshua and Caleb were two that they were determined to be on God's side, and because of that, they were confident because of those things. And so we need to keep that in mind. All right, let's turn to Numbers 27. Numbers 27. So they've wandered in the wilderness 40 years. We've basically skipped over a bunch of numbers there. But someone read verses 12 through 23 there. So I'm amazed at Moses here. He knows he can't go in the promised land. He's told by God to go up to this mountain, and when you've seen it, you're going to be gathered to your people. Basically, you're going to die because you rebelled against me. But what was Moses' response? He said in verse 16, "Let the Lord, the God of the spirits of all flesh, appoint a man over the congregation, and who shall lead them out and bring them in, that the congregation of the Lord may not be as a sheep that have no shepherd." And so Moses is saying, God, you please choose a leader that will take over so that these people may not be as a sheep that have no shepherd. He knew those people well, and they've been wandering in the wilderness. They needed a leader that would go in. And so it's interesting here. God says to Moses, "Take Joshua, the son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand on him." Basically, God chose Joshua here and described him as a man in whom is the Spirit. And so here we see Joshua as the successor of Moses, in whom is the Spirit. God is saying in whom is the Spirit there. And our leadership lesson is that godly leaders must be Spirit-led. We must be people of the Word, people that will study the Word, the people that will be not so hard-headed, that we would be open to be Spirit-led. We all need to be that way. God saw that in Joshua. We all should hope that God sees that in us. Does he think that way of us? If we have doubts about that, What are we doing to change that? Are we living our lives in such a way that we're people of the Word, that we're willing to be led, not from our own mind, but we're willing to let God lead us in our lives? All right, the last passage I'd like for us to look at outside of the book of Joshua is Deuteronomy 31. Deuteronomy 31. So here we have a little bit, I guess you could say, of repetition here in the book of Deuteronomy, but also a little bit more details. We see in verse 2 of Deuteronomy 31 that Moses was 120 years old. He said, I am no longer able to go out and come in. The Lord has said to me, you shall not go over this Jordan. And so Moses is telling the people, all Israel, what's going to happen. They're going to go into the promised land. They're going to destroy these. And this is basically an outline of the book of Joshua here of what's going to happen. Notice, let's just read it, verse 3. The Lord your God himself will go over before you. He will destroy these nations before you, so that you shall dispossess them. And Joshua will go over at your head as the Lord has spoken. And the Lord will do to them as he did to Sihon and Og, the kings of the Amorites, and to their land which he destroyed them. And the Lord will give them over to you, and shall do to them according to the whole commandment I have commanded you. Be strong and courageous. Do not fear or be in dread of them, for it is the Lord your God who goes with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Then Moses summoned Joshua and said to him in the sight of all Israel, be strong and courageous, for you shall go with this people into the land which the Lord has sworn to their fathers to give them, and you shall put them in possession of it. It is the Lord who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed. So Moses says several things. If you don't have, I'm a highlighter, but if you don't have verse 6 like marked down or underlined, go ahead and do it. We're going to see that same phrase all throughout Joshua. But if we don't learn anything from tonight other than verse 6, we all need to learn verse 6. It is the Lord who goes with us. He will not leave you or forsake you. You know, I don't know what you have going on this week in your life. I don't know. I may know what some of you have going on. You may not know what I have going on. But here's the fact. No matter where we are, the same words could be said directly to us. Be strong and courageous. Do not fear or be in dread of them, for it is the Lord your God who goes with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Here we have the affirmation of a new leader of Israel, the one who will put the people in possession of the promised land. But our leadership lesson that I think we need to learn here is leaders must be willing to fill a void. Does it say anywhere in here that Joshua said, pick me, pick me? Joshua was willing to be a good follower. He was right there with Moses. He was a fearless warrior. He was dependable. He was willing to fill a void. I don't know that we see any indication where he said he was just clamoring. He's talking to Moses. They've been talking about this for quite some time, and he wanted Moses to put his name up before God. No, that's not how we're not given any indication of that. Moses said, God, we want you to choose somebody, And God said, Joshua. But then what does Moses tell Joshua? He tells the whole children of Israel, be strong and be courageous. Do not be in fear of them. But then verse 7, then Moses summoned Joshua and said to him in the sight of all Israel, the same thing. Be strong and courageous. Why was he going to have to tell him that? Because they're going to face all kinds of things. They're going to face the giants in the land. They're going to face those fortified cities. They were going to face the things that everybody else, when they saw those things, said, no, we can't do this. They were going to face those things. They were going to face tough times. And Joshua needed to hear these words, be strong and courageous. And Moses also said, it is the Lord who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed. We see this repeated over and over in the book of Joshua. And I'm convinced that when we hear things over and over in the Bible, it's because we need to hear those things over and over. There's a reason why they're in there over and over. I think there's a reason why Joshua was told, be strong and courageous. Now, he was a fearless warrior, but he still needed to hear it. We're going to see where, he faced a soldier he didn't recognize. And Joshua said, are you for us? Basically, he's wondering, okay, are you a good guy or a bad guy? There's times Joshua needed to know to be strong or courageous. And I think the same thing goes for us. In our families, do we need to be strong and courageous? For sure. Parenting isn't for wimps, if you hadn't figured that out. If you have young kids, you probably have figured that out already. But let me assure you, as your kids get older, parenting's not for wimps. We need to hear, be strong and courageous. When we have aging parents, do we need to hear, be strong and courageous? When we age ourselves, do we need to hear, be strong and courageous? When we have friends going through cancer or marriage issues, whatever it is, do we need to hear, be strong and courageous? He will not leave you or forsake you. Absolutely. We need to hear all those things. Did Joshua need to hear it? Yes. But we need to hear it. I see this in school all the time. Who's a leader at school among kids? It's really someone that's willing to fill a void. Derek, is that right? Who's the leader on the football team? Is somebody just willing to step up, fill a void? And a lot of times coaches sit there and they wonder who's going to rise. They don't necessarily pick the leaders. They see who steps up and becomes a leader. And that's the way we have to be. We're living in a world where people don't want to lead. They want to do as little as possible. That's just the world we live in. We're all so busy, so let's just do as little as possible. But what happens when we do that? If we sit back, somebody else is going to step up, and it may be the wrong person. Do you want to be president of the United States? No, I don't want to be president of the United States. But sometimes you wonder, well, who gets chosen? And sometimes it's, okay, we've got somebody willing to step up, or some people think they want to step up, or whatever it is. I'm not trying to get political. I'm just trying to make a point that if the good folks don't step up and fill a void, then the wrong folks will step up and fill a void. And then we look around and say, well, why are they up there? Well, it's because somebody better didn't step up and fill a void. So let's learn from Joshua that we need to step up and fill a void. I think we can do this. Let's go ahead and look at Joshua 1. Those are some of the main points outside of Joshua. Let's just stick our big toe in Joshua 1. Let's look at verses 1 through 6. Someone else read those verses for us.
After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spoke to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, to the land which I am giving to them, the children of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, I have given you, as I said to Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and to the great sea toward the going down of the sun shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life, as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and of good courage, for to this people you shall divide as an inheritance of the land which I swore to their fathers to give them.
So there's so many things in these 6 verses, and we don't have time to break down every single thing. But I think it's good for us to see how the book of Joshua starts, especially after we read the end of Numbers and the end of Deuteronomy. It's just natural that it flows right in here, verses 1 through 6. But let's notice a few leadership lessons from verses 1 through 6. Sometimes we're asked to lead in ways we did not ask, and I kind of mentioned that here just a minute ago. Verse 1, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant. So the Lord tapped him on the shoulder, basically, and says, okay, Moses is dead, you lead the people. We're not indicated that Joshua prayed to God, saying, please give me this leadership task. Many times we're asked to lead and we wonder how we got there, why we're there, especially when tough times come. We wonder those things. But sometimes we're asked to lead in ways we did not ask, but that doesn't mean we should back out. I think Joshua did the best he could and gave it his all, and we'll see that. Second thing, let's notice verse 3. Every place, this is God speaking, every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, just as I promised to Moses. We must remember that it is God that gives us everything. God that gives us everything. God is informing Joshua, okay, I'm going to be with you, and everywhere you go, I have given it to you. And the reality is, we could all say that. God could tell all of us this. Everywhere, everything you have is because God has given it to us. Everything I have is because God has given it to me. Everything you have is because God has given it to you. We have this self-sufficient mindset in the U.S. And some of that's healthy. That we need to work for things and throughout my life, I can't say I haven't been helped along the way, but nobody paid $1 for me to go to college. I had to work from the get-go. But sometimes when we do that, we think we've earned it or we've gotten it. No, God has given us everything we have. And here right at the beginning, before Joshua even leads the people, he says, okay, I'm going to lead you in this land, but pretty much keep in mind that I'm giving this to you. And we need to remember that every single thing we have, God gives us everything. Leaders in our country need to remember that? Yeah, we all need to remember that. Next, we can be assured that because God was with leaders of the Bible, He's with us. And this is what I want us to remember tonight. This is what I need to hear tonight, and I hope you need to hear it as well. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of my life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. Why do we have the Old Testament? Why do we have the Scriptures? It's because of this. God is telling Joshua, you've seen how I was with Moses. Just as I was with Moses, I'm going to be with you. We have the benefit of seeing it in the written word, how he was with Moses, how he is with Joshua, but how he is with everybody else throughout the world that tried to follow him. And so it should be comforting to us that he's with us. He's not going to leave us or forsake us. We need to remember that as well. Just as he was with others, with leaders of the Bible, he's with us. And last, notice verse 6. Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers to give to them. He says this statement, you shall cause. The leadership lesson I put down here is, again, in leadership, others depend on us. When we look at our families, when we look at our kids, do we have a direct impact on how they come up? Yes. He could be saying the same thing to us. To the leadership situations we're in, whether with friendships, do we have a cause and is there effect on our friendship? Well, we're in charge of that. Do we open our mouth to speak up when we need to speak up? God was telling Joshua here, you're going to cause these people to inherit the land. In other words, you have this role. You're going to have an effect on these people. He's telling them that at the beginning. And that's what leadership is having an effect on those around us. And whether it's comforting the person going through cancer or struggling with something, let's have an effect. Let's allow God to use us to have an effect on others. And will some of it be scary? Yes. But we need to be strong and courageous because God is with us. Let's bow for a word of prayer. Dear Father, we thank you for the words that you've given to us tonight. We thank you for this story of Joshua. Dear Father, help us as we go throughout this quarter to see your presence in our lives, to realize that you're there, that you're hearing this prayer, that you're there for us and with us, that you sent your Son to die for us. You've given us your word that gives us all these examples of courageous people in your word. And dear Father, help us to be more courageous. Help us to be stronger. Help us to be willing to lead in all the areas that we're presented. And it's through your Son's name that we pray. Amen. Thank you, and we'll pick up there, verse 7 next week.